sec. Yeah, so we're going to talk today about gallbladder cancer, basically neoadjuvant and adjuvant therapy. Let me put this full screen. Yeah. So if you have any questions, just put them on the chat platform, or you can unmute yourself and ask once we've finished the talk. So gallbladder for us in India is not very rare. I'll just discuss the NCRP data, which was published earlier last month, actually, for up to 2016. The sad thing about gallbladder cancer is, if you look at all the clinical trials that have been done in the world, you will see that it is lumped together with cholangiocarcinoma. Even in cholangiocarcinoma, we know that the biology of hilar, intrahepatic, extrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma is different. And if you look at gallbladder and cholangiocarcinoma, the biology is even more different. But they're all lumped together because in the West, I mean, I've spent a long time in London, I hardly saw any patients with gallbladder cancer. Actually, when I was working in Northeast London, where there was a huge, there's a large population of Asians, including people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, we saw a lot of patients. I saw at least a lot of patients with gallbladder cancer. So I don't know whether, and they had no exposure to the Ganges water because obviously they were living in Northeast London. So I think it's if you look at the epidemiology, Dr. Dikshit at Tata Hospital is doing a fantastic study looking at the causative factors. So we don't know exactly what the cause is. And Dr. Jagannath did a study where, half the cluster randomization, where half the villages, they gave water which was purified, and another village which had water which was not purified. So we still don't know why gallbladder cancer is so common in the Ganges belt in North India. Having said that, I've seen two patients. I've been in Chennai only for 10 days, and I've seen at least referrals, one who's never been to North India. So it's not that you don't see it in the southern part of India. You see it everywhere. So I think we need to, as within India, look at the number of gallbladder cancers in various states and see and find a solution to it, because the West is not going to. This is the data from the NCRP. You see that in women, gallbladder cancer is the third most common cancer in women in Delhi. It is in Tripura also. It's the second most common in Dibrugarh. So in Northeast India, it is, you see Kamrup, urban, all these are states in Northeast India. For women, it is one of the common cancers. If you look at the age-adjusted incidence in the population-based cancer registries across India, so Northeast India, it is quite common, and Delhi is number 3 in both males and females. So it is not uncommon. If you've not read the NCRP latest data, I think you should read it, because we should know what the incidence and prevalence of cancer is in India. So as I said, it includes, all of these are lumped together: gallbladder, bile duct, and ampulla of Vater. So it's quite aggressive. Untreated, the median survival is less than 6 months. So, when we talk of early gallbladder cancer, it is very important to see what the T staging is. And there have been few publications from PGI Chandigarh, from Tata Hospital as well. So muscle invasive is T1B and beyond. So all clinical trials that I'll talk about include patients who have been recruited for muscle invasive gallbladder. So it is T1B and beyond cancers. And the way you manage most of these cancers is different. So if you see a patient who's had a laparoscopic cholecystectomy or open cholecystectomy for an incidentally detected gallbladder cancer, and if it is T1B and beyond, so I can see somebody having a haircut while listening to the talk. That's very good. So so T1B, if you have a patient with T1B cancer, the prognosis or the outcomes are slightly worse compared to T1A. So if a patient comes to you having had a cholecystectomy and it's T1B, there are some papers which show that this patient should undergo a radical cholecystectomy with proper nodal dissection. So T1A, like I said, disease-specific survival is very good. T1B, again, controversial, but papers from a lot of references are there. You should look up these papers which have come from Tata Hospital and IHPBA as well. So we do recommend radical cholecystectomy. And P2 and beyond, I think there's no controversy. Patients should undergo radical cholecystectomy. Very nice paper from Dr. Shraddha Patkar about 510 consecutive resections done at Tata Hospital. And if you see stage-wise, the survival for stage 3 and 2 is 57% and 86%. So stage 3, not very good for node positive patients. Median follow-up is about 2 years. So I think the point I'm trying to make is in a lot of these patients had multimodality treatment where they had neoadjuvant chemotherapy or chemoradiotherapy because these cancers have an aggressive biology. We talk about pancreatic cancer as a systemic disease. I think gallbladder cancer is very much similar to that and is a systemic disease and carries a poor prognosis. So I think what I'll talk about is who are the candidates for neoadjuvant therapy and whether you use any systemic and local treatment options. So we talked about this in a paper I published in about 4 years ago, and then Vikram expanded the number of patients to about 160, I think, and published it 2 years ago, where we tried to define the criteria for borderline resectable gallbladder cancer. So T3, T4 with contiguous liver involvement more than 2 centimeter. We recently had a case in tumor board where the liver involvement was most of segment 4B5 was involved and a bit of adjacent segment 6 was also involved. So, and the patient had neoadjuvant chemotherapy with gemcitabine platinum and had a fantastic response and had a resection. If this patient had gone for an upfront resection, he would have had to undergo multivisceral resection, which carries very high morbidity, especially if the colon and the adjacent organs are infiltrated. So these are the criteria we've tried to define involvement or impingement, which is less than 180 degrees for the common hepatic and the right and left hepatic artery. And also in incidental, we saw a lot of patients who had surgery for incidental gallbladder cancer and came with residual recurrent mass, which was just local recurrence because these patients probably had muscle invasive gallbladder cancer, but did not have undergo radical surgery. So just to talk about how we choose the systemic treatment for patients with gallbladder cancer, again, this is a pooled analysis of chemotherapy in advanced biliary tract cancer, just to give you a background of how we chose these drugs. So basically this pooled analysis showed that it included fluoropyrimidines, gemcitabine and platinum and a combination of fluoropyrimidine, gemcitabine, and showed that gemcitabine alone was not superior to fluoropyrimidines. And platinum compounds increase the activity of both 5-FU and gemcitabine. And the increase was more with the addition of platinum to gemcitabine than addition to fluoropyrimidines. Now, the reason I wanted to show this is that was the reason to have gemcitabine cisplatin as the arm in the ABC02 study, which has actually defined gem platinum as the treatment of choice in biliary tract cancers. And this also was the basis for the adjuvant BILCAP study, where patients were randomized to capecitabine versus observation, which I'll talk about, because both of these were pretty similar, gemcitabine and fluoropyrimidine. And when the study was being designed, Professor David Cunningham, one of my mentors at the Marsden, felt that we need to have an adjuvant regimen which is oral, does not need a lot of funding, all of that. So we were able to justify capecitabine alone as the adjuvant arm in the BILCAP study. So ABCO2 is the pivotal trial which has done more than a decade ago, published by Dr. Juan Vale. We had him at one of our Choosing Wisely GI cancer meetings, and which showed that the overall survival for gem cisplatin was significantly better compared to gemcitabine alone. So about 12 months versus 8 months. So this is the standard of care. At AIMS, I think Dr. Atul Sharma has done a clinical trial comparing gemcitabine cisplatin versus gem oxaliplatin. And in fact, he had published an upfront study. I don't know whether yeah, it's here. So again, there's a lot of work being done from India. This was an excellent trial published from AIMS, which showed that best supportive care versus GEM-OX for unresectable gallbladder cancer. It established gem-oxaliplatin as standard of care. There's a lot of debate about whether one should use oxaliplatin, cisplatin. I tend to go with gem-cis in fit patients. The only advantage with gem-ox is you can give it 2 weekly rather than gemcitabine cisplatin, where you have to call the patient on day 8 of a 3-week cycle. So both of them have their pros and cons. Gem-ox is slightly more expensive because oxaliplatin is more expensive. Cisplatin is just is quite cost effective. So we looked at about 37 patients when I was in Tata Hospital with neoadjuvant chemotherapy in patients with locally advanced gallbladder cancer, because we know that surgery is the only modality which will lead to cure. And we see a lot of patients who come with these huge masses, and it's difficult to straight away take them up for surgery. And so we published this about a few years ago in 37 patients, and median age was 54 years. And then Vikram, like I said, expanded it to 160 patients and showed that the median overall survival was 13 months. Not very different from the ABCO2 trial in unresectable gallbladder cancers. So maybe the biology is slightly different, or the gallbladder cancers probably have an aggressive biology, because in ABCO2 study, majority of patients had cholangiocarcinoma. So in about 41% patients, patients who were unresectable were able to, or borderline resectable, were able to undergo an R0 resection. So if you look at the chemoradiotherapy, which Dr. Engineer has done a lot of work from Tata Hospital, again, she published the phase 2 study just a year later. And as you can see, the response rates are higher with the chemoradiotherapy versus chemotherapy. But my perception is, again, I'm a medical oncologist, so maybe I'm biased, that the morbidity associated with the chemoradiotherapy is, I feel, slightly more compared to chemotherapy. So I remember I was there when we had this patient with repeated cholangitis. We had few patients with bile leaks. One patient had a colonic perforation during treatment, and liver metastasis and progressive disease is something which is the natural biology in some patients. With chemotherapy, 24% patients progressed, while 7% on chemoradiotherapy. The POLO trial is randomizing patients to neoadjuvant chemo versus chemoradiotherapy. So both of them showed that, the hypothesis generating and quite good data. Again, very similar. The whole point is that about 45 to 50% patients are able to undergo resection if they have some form of neoadjuvant therapy. And main reasons for non-resection have been progression of disease, and some of the patients are found unresectable at the time of surgery. So these are the ongoing planned trials in POLCA-GB it was not POLO, it was POLCA-GB, randomizing to GEM-CIS versus GEM radiotherapy. About almost 300 patients are planned. And this perioperative trial is surgery followed by CAPE versus GEM-CIS followed by surgery followed by CAPE. This is a trial that we are planning to do in similar group of patients, almost 400 planned. And Accelerate is an adjuvant trial run by AIMS, where patients are being randomized to chemo versus chemoradiotherapy, and I'll talk about it briefly. So I think this is the story about neoadjuvant therapy in gallbladder cancers. I think if you have a patient who has non-metastatic disease on staging CT scan or PET scan, rather than deciding that the patient is only for palliative treatment, one should consider neoadjuvant modality. And I would encourage that if you have a patient in Delhi or in Mumbai, or you would like to open any of these studies, I would encourage you to refer the patient to be enrolled in the clinical trial so that we finish recruitment sooner. Adjuvant chemotherapy, I think for every patient, I've always said adjuvant, ideally the endpoint should be overall survival, because what matters to patient is only two things, living longer and a good quality of life. Issues about margin positivity, node positivity, should we give chemo, should we give chemoradiation, or maybe SBRT or radiation alone? What regimen is best, whether it's oxaliplatin, cisplatin? So I think this is what, these are the questions that we have for adjuvant therapy. Just briefly about the meta-analysis that have been done in, this was published last year, huge number of patients, improved survival was seen for chemotherapy, and further analysis suggested chemo better with the gemcitabine-based regimens were better, and we've seen that in pancreas cancer as well, that the gem-based regimens were better compared to 5-FU-based regimen. This was the first randomized trial published from Japan. Till 2017, till up to 3 years ago, we actually had no accepted adjuvant strategy in gallbladder cancers. This was the first trial, and it had about 112 patients with gallbladder cancer. Like I said earlier, in the Western data or Japanese or the Eastern data, most patients with gallbladder are lumped together with cholangiocarcinoma, and these are completely different cancers. So we have to find the answers to these issues. So patients were randomized to post-op chemotherapy with 5-FU mitomycin C and observation. And basically it showed improved 5-year survival in patients with gallbladder cancer. It was 26 versus 14%, but there was no difference. The curves were on top of each other for those patients who had cholangiocarcinoma. So this was the first indication to show that possibly in gallbladder cancer, it's probably more chemosensitive than cholangiocarcinoma. And it was hypothesis generating in a subgroup analysis that chemo works in gallbladder cancer. The SEER database looked at adjuvant chemoradiotherapy in gallbladder cancer. So, and they tried to answer the question, which patients would benefit? And the downside with any SEER database is there's a lot of heterogeneity. So the data is as good as, as the person putting the data in is. There were no chemo details available, whether the patient had gemcitabine, 5-FU, or what regimen it was, whether it was gemcitabine twice a week or was it once a week, because we give different regimens with radiotherapy. And recurrence was not captured in the SEER database, but they had the time that the patient died. And also they excluded patients who died within 2 months of surgery. So they came up with a nomogram and a risk prediction model. And based on this, the conclusions were that patients with node positive disease or those with R1 resection should be considered for chemoradiotherapy. But again, like I said, there are a lot of downsides to the database. Surgery alone, 9 months, surgery plus chemo, 14 months, and surgery plus chemoradiotherapy was 28 months. And the benefit was the most. And this is a nomogram which is available on their website as well. The SWOG study was a phase 2 study with the adjuvant capecitabine and gemcitabine, followed by radiotherapy and concurrent capecitabine. And 32% patients had gallbladder cancer in this study. The majority had cholangiocarcinoma. And the 2-year survival was quite encouraging with with this approach. This was all patients had chemo followed by chemoradiotherapy. So another meta-analysis published before just a few years ago again showed a trend for improvement in survival with any adjuvant treatment, and was statistically better for CTRT but not with radiotherapy alone. So I think the consensus is that we should consider chemoradiotherapy for node positive and R1 resections, but this is all based on retrospective data and meta-analysis, which had very lot of heterogeneity in all the clinical on the trials or the retrospective reviews that were there. So again, this is a similar study which shows that published 2 years ago, that survival benefit for lymph node positive R1 resections. So now coming on to the adjuvant chemotherapy trials, the ones on top, the BILCAP has been seen as practice changing because this has changed all the guidelines. PRODIGE 12 was slightly disappointing, and I'll talk about it. So BILCAP randomized patients to capecitabine versus observation. PRODIGE 12 randomized to gem oxaliplatin versus observation, because observation was the standard of care in all biliary tract cancers. We had no adjuvant strategy. The SWOG trial had gem cape followed by cape radiotherapy. I talked about that. BCAT was gemcitabine versus observation, and this Japanese trial randomized patients to S1 versus observation. We are able to get S1 for some of our patients in India as well. ACTICA was gemcitabine cisplatin versus cape, which is a very sensible trial. But now they've changed the design, and the R1 patients are randomized to radiotherapy versus observation. So I think this trial will tell us whether radiotherapy really actually makes a difference to R1 resections or not. Because right now we just, if a patient is in the MDT and we end up erring on the side of caution and offering chemoradiotherapy after chemotherapy. So BILCAP, very important study, almost more than 400 patients recruited. 79 patients had gallbladder cancer in this study. Now, if you look at the study, the overall survival on intention to treat analysis is not significantly different. The p-value is 0.097. Though numerically, if you see, it's 51 months, the curve with capecitabine is on top of observation, but the study was they changed the sample size twice. I think they were while the study was being done, and there was no benefit seen. It did not meet its primary endpoint. We can try and justify it, do lots of statistical analysis like we all do. But this was actually a statistically negative trial. It took years and years to recruit. I recruited patients into this study. I remember capecitabine is not an easy drug to take. So, and in Asian population, in our population, the doses of 1,250 milligrams per meter square are quite toxic. By toxic, I mean they have grade 3 diarrhea and PPE. So that is palmoplantar erythema or hand-foot syndrome, which is not reddening of palms and soles in our Indian patients, but most of them have darkening or blackening of hands and soles. So, but this is seen as practice changing because when you look at the per protocol analysis, the results were significantly in favor of capecitabine. Per protocol means all the patients who actually ended up receiving the treatment. Progression-free survival was significantly better with the capecitabine, but this was a secondary endpoint. This slide I borrowed from Professor Primrose, who was the first author of the study. And if you see in this muscle invasive gallbladder cancer, capecitabine looks better than observation, but again, it's a subgroup analysis, very difficult to draw any conclusions. PRODIGE 12, again, a very disappointing trial. I was hoping, we know that gemcitabine cisplatin works very well in our patients. So this trial randomized patients to observation versus gemcitabine oxaliplatin, and doses which are fairly well tolerated for 12 cycles, which is 6 months of therapy, exactly how we do in colorectal cancer. We give 12 cycles of FOLFOX. And as you see, the GEMOX is, yes, slightly better, but the results are not significantly different. And so again, disappointing study, did not meet its primary endpoint. Though one can say numerically, GEMOX, the median relapse-free survival was 30 months versus 18 months. But based on the calculations, the results were negative. Similarly, significantly, there was no improvement in overall survival as well. Though numerically, median overall survival was 76 months versus 51 months. So it's 20 months more actually. No trend seen in any subgroup, though surprisingly, the worst survival was seen in gallbladder cancer. So if you see here, the GEMOX curve is on top of the observation curve, both for extrahepatic and intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma. But for gallbladder cancer, it is actually worse. So a lot of times I have patients where, I am told, why are you giving capecitabine adjuvant? Why don't you give adjuvant Gemcis when we know that Gemcis is the standard of care? And a lot of times we've seen that gemcitabine is better than 5-FU. So this study actually makes me nervous in giving anybody with gallbladder cancer gem platinum as adjuvant therapy. So just the downsides here, only 18% patients had gallbladder cancer. So I don't think we can make any conclusions to bring into daily practice. Also, we don't have evidence for Gemcis in adjuvant setting. About 38% had R1 resections in BILCAP versus 14% here. And about 48% patients had node positive disease. And despite that, there was a advantage in patients with, for per protocol patient, there was advantage in patients who had adjuvant capecitabine. And plus it is cost effective to give an oral drug compared to patients coming for chemotherapy every other week to the hospital. So again, both studies, if you've seen, have shown better than expected survival after surgery. And I think it is related to our tendency to put really fit, well patients into clinical trials. Clinical trials are highly underrepresented for patients who are elderly or who have any organ dysfunction or a lot of comorbidities, as we see in our clinic. So the future is, I think, to identify markers of resistance. We know that high HENT1 expression is associated with longer survival, is a marker of gemcitabine sensitivity. But a lot of issues relating to that, relating to cutoffs, positive, negative, and whether we use the rabbit polyclonal or mouse monoclonal antibodies. So there are a lot of issues related to that. Just summarizing the adjuvant trials, the PRODIGE was a French study, showed no benefit, but you see 51 versus 76 months overall survival. BILCAP showed some benefit for capecitabine in per protocol analysis. ACTICA, I think we will wait to see. Design has been revised. It used to be Gemcis versus observation, but now they have added capecitabine and taken the standard of care from BILCAP. And also in R1 resections, they have added radiotherapy versus no radiotherapy as well, which is great. Observation versus the Japanese trial, we are waiting to hear. BCAT was again no benefit with gemcitabine versus observation in patients with cholangiocarcinoma. The overall survival was pretty similar, 64 versus 62 months. Accelerate trial, I think we've already discussed, being done at AIIMS, where patients are being randomized to chemoradiation versus chemotherapy. It's a phase 3 randomized controlled trial being done by Dr. Atul Sharma. And if you have a patient, you must refer the patient to be included in a clinical trial. So I think we can safely conclude that very important when you see the patient in the clinic, define the intent of treatment right at the beginning. So look at the scans and see whether the adjacent segment 4B5 is involved and there is no other extra hepatic or a metastatic disease. Then consider the patient for neoadjuvant therapy because surgery is curative in these patients, and you can get about 40 to 50% of these patients to surgery with chemotherapy or chemoradiotherapy. Chemoradiotherapy does have slightly more morbidity compared to chemotherapy, but the randomized trial will answer that question. So I think the next question is intensifying the pre-op chemotherapy like we've done with pancreatic cancer, whether we give something like modified FOLFIRINOX in young, fit patients, because we know irinotecan has activity in gallbladder cancer as well. Because when I was in Tata, I remember I started using Kapiri, capecitabine, irinotecan as my second line therapy option. Again, IDH mutations have shown quite amazing data in cholangiocarcinoma, and we have a drug which can target it. But gallbladder cancers somehow don't express it. So I think we need to look at the molecular cohorts separately. Adjuvant, currently capecitabine is the standard of care and no role of radiotherapy, but I think needs to be investigated in R1 disease. I think all the guidelines reflect what we have discussed today. This slide I borrowed from Professor Srikhande. Again, gallbladder mass, if the patient comes to you with obstructive jaundice, you would do MRI and MRCP. And the unresectability, look at it and decide whether your patient needs neoadjuvant therapy. Do a triphasic, good quality CT scan. You don't need to do a PET scan. But if you have it available and a patient is affording, yes, PET scan or a PET MRI scan is also a possibility. So like we discussed, you can consider neoadjuvant therapy. Unresectability criteria, distant metastasis, non-regional adenopathy. So very important, you define M1 disease. If a patient has a para-aortic lymph node, that would come into M1 disease. Look through the TNM classification, and to do the best for your patient, you must know what is regional lymph node for each of your cancers. Type 3 and 4 blocks on MRCP are criteria for, again, unresectability. So incidental, we've already talked about. Anything beyond T1B, you must refer for revision cholecystectomy because that would be the curative surgery followed by adjuvant capecitabine. Again, this is a paper we published. I think you should have a read. I had a few molecular cases which I actually wanted to show you just to highlight the point that that in gallbladder, things have changed significantly now, and we are doing, I feel whether we should be doing BRCA testing in all gallbladder cancers. So I'll just show you these two cases just for education. So this is a case of Dr. Amol Patel, who was at RR and now is in Mumbai. He's doing a lot of work in gallbladder cancer, as is Dr. Atul Sharma. And if any of you is interested in working in gallbladder, we've created a pan-India small group of oncologists. If you want to get involved, just send me a WhatsApp. 70-year-old lady, no comorbidities, presented with abdominal pain. You see the PET scan, the liver is studded with metastasis, and they are, non-segmental sparing. So stage 4, GemOx given, partial response, continued on single agent gemcitabine. So in metastatic settings, sometimes, we continue with the maintenance chemotherapy. She progressed, and we did this foundation test, which is a next generation sequencing. The TMB is 10 mutations here per megabase. So according to the current FDA guideline, this patient would be eligible for immunotherapy based on this. And MSI stable, but the patient was HER2 amplified. So this patient was started on trastuzumab plus nab-paclitaxel. Her symptoms got better, CA19-9 dropped, but she progressed after 4 cycles. So she was started on lapatinib capecitabine. So she had a fantastic response with halving of CA19-9, but then, about 6 months later or 5 months later, rapidly progressed. So there is an Allen score which we use, and I would like you all to read it, what the Allen score is. It looks at simple criteria. It looks at albumin, lymphocyte, and neutrophil ratio. So, and it classifies patients into low risk, intermediate risk, and high risk. Low risk, the median survival is, I think, almost 30 months, but this patient was in high risk for biliary tract cancers. Her survival would have been, based on the criteria, 4 months. But with all this NGS and giving her HER2 targeted therapy, her median overall survival was almost 18 months. Now, what we saw when you look at this variant of unknown significance, always look at the reports in detail. Don't just look at what these guys send you, but look at the whole panel and every single mutation that they've tested. Because what is variant of unknown significance may become known significance down the line. So this patient had a HER4 mutation, and there are some reports in breast, that it may offer resistance to trastuzumab. And lapatinib possibly may overcome this resistance. That's why she had a fantastic, good response to lapatinib. And the newer TKIs like neratinib, tucatinib, which are getting available now, may probably, cause a deeper response in this patient. And this paper published from Dr. Anil Agarwal's group, fantastic paper, I think, 14% of patients with gallbladder cancer are HER2 positive. And I'm so happy to see the Indian data coming out in gallbladder cancer, because as I said, the West will not find the answer to our issues. And there were 95% concordance between IHC and FISH, because we know that there was a learning curve when we started doing HER2 testing in stomach cancer. So the next patient, quickly, the last case I'll show you with gallbladder cancer is, no, this is CA pancreas. So yeah, so 66-year-old gentleman, normal performance status, newly diagnosed in November, had GEM-CIS and progressed this year in May. And we sent his blocks for NGS, and you find a BRCA mutation. Now, as we are sending these tests, we are finding these somatic mutations, and I am also learning a lot, and it's quite an exciting phase for molecular oncology. And I think whether you're a surgeon, radiation oncologist, medical oncologist, all of us should know about this. And then I delved deeper into it, and I found this paper that, there are about 4% patients with biliary tract cancers who have BRCA mutation. Now, in pancreas cancer, we are testing every patient. It's part of every guideline that all patients with pancreatic cancer should undergo BRCA mutation. And there is a study which says that, patients with BRCA mutation, ladies, have an MRI breast. The MRI field should be gone down to the pancreas, and the pancreas should also be screened in those patients who have BRCA mutation, so that the pancreatic cancer could be caught early. Whether we should be doing BRCA testing in all patients with biliary tract cancer, including gallbladder cancer. So I've had actually 2 patients with gallbladder cancer who've had this BRCA mutation, which was quite surprising. Okay, great. So I think I'm going to stop sharing now, and we're going to address the questions. We have quite a few questions on the chat. Okay, so let's start. Oh, how to manage hand-foot syndrome. Okay, so this is a very interesting question. So, how obviously you used urea-based creams, and you can use, the creams are quite expensive. So, but one of the patients told me, within Vaseline, you can add glycerine and some urea-based creams, and that's quite good. Pyridoxine, the data is controversial because there was one randomized trial from the Royal Marsden in GI cancer patients which showed there was no benefit. But I have a preference to use pyridoxine in the dose of 50 milligram 3 times a day. And there is an enzymatic rationale to it. I saw something on Twitter which I found quite interesting. There is a patient advocate, Manju, who suggested that applying mehendi, henna, to hand-foot syndrome is quite protective and quite helpful. So I think we should probably do a randomized trial for hand-foot syndrome for patients on capecitabine, where half of them get henna and half of them don't get henna, to find out the answer to it. But these are the strategies which one can use to it. But the most important thing is you stop the tablet. And so I had a patient who didn't stop the tablet, came to me in a wheelchair with hands and feet blistering and bleeding, because they felt that, if they don't stop, if they stop the tablet, their cancer will get worse. So very important you counsel your patients on capecitabine that the minute it starts hurting, they must stop the tablet, because you have to have a washout period and then restart with a 20 to 25% reduced dose. Very important that you reduce the dose if a patient has had grade 3 or 4 toxicity. Blistering is grade 4. So preferred regimen for NACT. So my preferred regimen is gemcitabine cisplatin. But if you spoke to Dr. Atul Sharma, he's also right. His preferred regimen is gemcitabine oxaliplatin. We still don't know the answer to whether, I'm just slightly concerned that GEM-OX trial was negative. So I prefer to use gemcitabine cisplatin because of that as well. And plus the data is more robust with gem cisplatin. So role of tumor markers in assessing response. Which tumor markers must be done and should be done in every follow-up? So I routinely, in all GI cancers, I do CEA and CA 19.9, and whichever is raised, I only do that on follow-up. So in gallbladder, CA 19.9 is usually high, and I would do that at 3 monthly intervals, and only if the marker is rising, I do a scan. So in advanced cancer patients, I tend not to do a scan if the marker is raised at the beginning, because these patients are secretors. So, they would, once the marker starts going up, then it's a cheaper form of liquid biopsy or ctDNA, I would say. Okay, I'll add you to the group. What are type 3? So it's again, it's on MRCP. It's the type of blocks. Maybe we'll discuss cholangiocarcinoma, and I will get one of my surgical colleagues to go through the type of Hyler blocks, type 1, type 2, type 2A, B, and type 3 and 4. So maybe we'll talk about that, Kanchan. Any dose-dense regimen as NACT for gall-like breast? So no, I mean, the thing is, breast cancer is a common cancer. So these are rare cancers. To do a clinical trial in this, the BILCAP study took almost 10 years to recruit. So, and in India, we have not been very good in doing randomized studies. So I think the question now is which regimen before we go on to dose dense regimen. We still don't know whether GemCis or GEM-OX, which one is better. We tend to use it based on our preferences. But I think the next question would be whether FOLFIRINOX in a neoadjuvant setting, because you always want to dose intensify a neoadjuvant, whether 40% becomes 60%. That is something I want to know. So I think it will be good to do a feasibility study with modified FOLFIRINOX in gallbladder cancer. So that would be, I think, dose intensification we should do. Role of port size excision in incidental carcinoma. Again, it's the data is very, so if you were in Tata Hospital, Dr. Mahesh Goel would do a port side excision in patients with incidental. So there is some data that, that these patients tend to recur on the port side, and excising that helps. We have put that we put a separate section on this, which one of the surgeons has written in the ICMR guidelines. So which I think Dr. V.K. Kapoor chaired, and I was part of it. So maybe you could read the ICMR guidelines, and I may send it on the group. How long should pyridoxine be given? I mean, I gave it throughout the duration of chemotherapy, throughout the duration of capecitabine, throughout. It's a very easy to take, harmless drug. It's B6, vitamin B6 that they take for throughout the duration of capecitabine. Some people use camphor plus coconut oil for hand-foot syndrome, since urea-based cream is yes. So you are right, Manish, and I think patients themselves educate us what works for them. And I'm very excited about recommending henna or mehendi to my next patient, because I really want to. So because, when we put henna on our hand and head, it is actually calming and soothing. So maybe that will help. We don't know. In your borderline GBC study, what's the PCR rate? So I've had a pancreatic cancer patient who's had a PATH-CR who was BRCA mutated, and we gave gemcisplatin. First pathological complete response I've seen. I have never seen a gallbladder patient with PATH-CR. Maybe with molecular testing, we may identify patients with BRCA mutation or other where, you know, where the patient may have a PAT CR. So don't have a PAT CR rate, but the complete response rate was about 10 to, with the radiotherapy, it was about 10%. So any other questions? I mean, Dr. Sareen, it's a pleasure to see you. I just saw you. So it's, I think we discussed, we are learning more from breast cancer in other cancers. I don't know, I'm trying to unmute you. It's not happening. Unmute audio. Ha, Dr. Sareen.
Yeah, right. No, very nice, short and crisp, and good questions. Yes, you're right. You know, I mean, trying new drugs in neoadjuvant chemotherapy would make sense, right?
Yeah. And should HER2 be done in every patient and we go for trastuzumab? So Navneet, I do it in every patient.
But do you do it somatic or you do it
no, IHC
genetic?
in the path that we have. So I feel that any marker that can be easily done, and if a patient can afford trastuzumab, I tend to do it. We know that about 15% are positive. In breast, about 25% are positive.
Yeah.
So again, Dr. Amol Patel is doing a study on this, Navneet. So, and you know, it would be good if somebody wants to work with him to do this. Since you said that 50% gets operable post NACT gets operable, is this an Indian patient? Yeah, this all data, Manish, is in Indian patients in Tata Hospital and mainly in Tata Hospital. And I think AIMS, Dr. Atul Sharma has also got fantastic data. So in BRCA positive, whether you tried PARP inhibitors, again, you know, the patient hasn't gone to that, but yes, I would probably reserve it for progression because it's so expensive. And once you start a patient on it, you can't stop. In pancreas, we give it as maintenance after patient has had FOLFIRINOX. But I would not give it in gallbladder as maintenance. I would probably give it at progression because we have no data. And so, great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sareen. Thank you. Thank you. See you next week. We are doing neoadjuvant therapy in breast cancer.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
See you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.